Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I am delighted to welcome my guest today, Reema Ahmad, long COVID sufferer and now published author as well. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jackie. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
It's really lovely to have you here. So to start with, would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit and what it is that you do?
Yeah, okay. So I am a neuro-linguistic programming-based life coach, NLP for short, and I am also a relationship and trauma counselor. I have been a speaker, speaking in the area of sexuality, gender abuse awareness, and recently also parenting. I'm a writer. I've edited a book. I've written a book. I also write poetry.
Amazing. That sounds like a lot of things.
Yeah, it's a lot of different things. They all happen over a long period of time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So would you mind just talking a little bit about your experiences with COVID?
So the first infection I had was actually in March of 2020, when it was just beginning in India. And in my part of the country, there was not even that much awareness about COVID then. Like, we knew it was happening because of my brother who was in the NHS in the UK. We knew it was happening and it was coming, but we weren't really aware that people were getting it in Delhi and around Delhi. So when I got it, I didn't even realize that that's what I had. And I'd been traveling. So I came back home and I phoned my brother and he's like, oh no, this is all COVID, and rest and do this and do that and isolate. So the first bout was actually pretty bad. I was very, very, very sick for about a month. I couldn't get up, I couldn't move. And then I continued to be sick for about 4 months, where my energy was really low and my digestion, just had taken a hit and sleep was bad. My hair was falling off. But you know how it is, there was not a lot of information on long COVID back then because it had just started happening in the world as well. So we knew because of my brother that, some people are having persistent symptoms and you can't really do much about it. So do as much as possible and keep going. So I sort of kept going through this cycle of I would feel better, and then I would take up walking, and then, it would take a hit again. I would start yoga and would take a hit again. Then I traveled into December 2020, and I remember being very sick for a month afterwards. And I would put it down to, chronic sciatica, or that, I've always had breathing issues and things like that. I would fall sick really quickly since I was a child. So I would always be like, oh, you need to do more. You need to push yourself more. It was that kind of journey. And I think in 2020, I got an infection again. And then the whole thing sort of started again, and it continued to go up and down. I started feeling better around March 2021. Those 6 months were like fairly okay. And I remember being very active. I started walking again. But again, after any activity, about a week of that activity, I would crash really badly with flu-like symptoms. Body temperature, increased body temperature and sensitivity, and all of my chronic sciatica would go up really badly, and there'd be all sorts of other issues. But I was not able to say, oh, this is what I've got, because there'd be periods where I'd be okay when I was not moving around so much. And then in January, I got the Omicron variant, which was rampant in India at that time. And the infection itself wasn't bad. It was like a flu. It was about a week, but I just kept dipping and dipping and dipping. And then I had to get surgery for my long-standing back issue in March of 2022. And after the surgery, I had to be lying down for about 4 or 5 weeks. So when you're lying down, you're just focused on the pain and you're thinking about, oh no, I've been in chronic pain for 20 years. Now I've got this surgery. Life is going to get better. But as soon as I started my physio and walking, everything just fell to pieces. It was just like my heart rate was out of control, my BP was dropping. And I think I was still not able to pinpoint that this has got anything to do with COVID. It was only because my brother was visiting and he was watching me. And he was like, "You're not okay. You're supposed to be feeling better after your surgery recovery, but you're just breathless and panting all the time." And then he took all of my stats and he was like, "Oh my God, how are you even standing? How are you even doing this? How are you walking about and doing stairs?" But I think at that moment is when it hit me that I had been in this phase for about close to 2 years, where I had been feeling all of these things in my body, but I had just been pushing, because it also coincided with a personal phase in my life where I'd done a lot of trauma recovery and healing work. And I was pushing myself to do more professionally, showing up more in terms of work, and letting go of a lot of old, what I used to call laziness. But it was a lot of, trauma issues, a lot of depression and anxiety. So I was doing better mentally, but my body was just not coping. And then the brain fog and everything, all of it just sort of made sense when he said, let's get your tests done. And he got my blood work done and everything confirmed that, it looked like I had long COVID. So it was these long 2 years of up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, where you have one person in the family who has long COVID, who's done so much work on it. But because you're in different countries, you're not really looking at each other.
Yeah.
I kept telling myself, oh no, you're overthinking. It's your anxiety again. You just keep making excuses for not doing this, not doing that. So it was very strange. It was all over the place. But part of the diagnosis also helped me accept that I have limitation and work my life around that. The first month after that was really horrible because, I've been looking at other people who haven't gotten better. So till the time you don't give it a name, you don't really think about, this is what I've got. It may or may never go. So that was hard. But when I got over that and I started my meds and I noticed some improvement, it got better.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've spoken to other people who have said, when you put a name on it, it can help in some ways because it's like you find your tribe, isn't it? There are other
Yeah.
people out there. You don't feel alone. You can sort of discuss ideas with them and things like that. But I think you've just kind of pointed out a different side to it, that actually if you put the name on it, you look at all these other people who haven't recovered and you go, oh my goodness, is this going to be me? So there's two sides to it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because till you haven't put a name on it, you're also trying to do quote unquote normal activities like moving around a lot, stepping out of the house or walking. But now that you know that you're so fragile and you're at increased risk, and you've already had it at least thrice, you cannot afford a fourth or a fifth, infection. You certainly have to curtail your life as well. There can't be any impromptu social gatherings. You have to really think about everything. How many people, where, who's going to be present? Are people going to wear masks? And all of those things. You just, that kind of calibration that you have to keep doing. And when you have a name, you also start noticing other very strange symptoms that I had, which was like constant goosebumps all over my skin and my face, which wouldn't let me sleep, a lot of temperature dysregulation, and my menstrual cycle was haywire. And, I started having symptoms like a 50-year-old woman, and I'm not even 40 yet. So when you also have a name, you start paying attention, and that can be very difficult because till you don't have a name, you're really like pretending. And I have lived on that kind of autopilot. It's not healthy, but pretending that I'm okay, nothing's wrong with me before I went into, deep trauma work and all of that. That's been my default for 25 years. So it was easy for me to survive like that. But now, knowing this is what you have, okay, what do I do now came a little later. I think I was in shock and I was miserable for about a month and a half. till my brother really, pulled me up and said, you know what, enough, just enough, just pick yourself up. This is what we'll do. We'll have a system for you. And he really helped me, have a system and help me pace and help me, you do this in the morning, this in the afternoon. So I had a lot of help and support because I had somebody who'd gone through that and who was close. So when I got a handle on that, I think in September of this year, things started improving a little bit. But it took a long time for that to happen.
We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if it's a human nature thing. I think, again, not wanting to stereotype too hard, but I think women maybe have this thing where we just get on with it. We have to get on with it because you've got responsibilities, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you just do it because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And like, how much do we put ourselves through? And again, it's not exclusively any one subgroup of people, for want of a better word, but we all do it, and it does so much harm, doesn't it? But we do it without realizing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my culture, there's this additional thing about, maybe that's all cultures all over the world, not calling attention to yourself, and not calling so much attention to yourself. So not talking about your symptoms as much. So even when people close to me knew I was sick, it would really take me to amplify everything I was feeling for them to be able to notice it.
Yeah.
And that made me think about, oh my God, this is so deeply ingrained in us. We keep a straight face through so much. People get used to just seeing you as a normal person with no illnesses, so to speak. And that also sort of coincides with how, when a lot of people found out that in March of 2022, I had a spinal surgery for chronic pain issues, they were like, oh, were you in pain all these years? I don't remember seeing you in pain. And it made me think about, oh my God, you're brilliant at camouflaging. So people very close to me also didn't know, except for family, that I have chronic spine issues, that every step I take is excruciating. I just gotten so used to covering that up. So all of this also made me think about how much you're used to covering everything up and just getting on with it, because that's what is expected of you, and that is what you also expect of yourself. To make a noise is to be weak, to be seen as, you're attention seeking, or your life is difficult for everybody. How is it so much harder for you? But in that sense, the diagnosis helped me. It gave me validation. It also gave me space to be able to say that, you know what, I can't do this. And because I had others in my family who'd researched so much on it and there was so much advocacy, it was easier for those around me to hear things, because it also came from my brother. So it also took him to advocate for me. She can't be doing XYZ. And that's it. You have to figure out the rest of you, how you're going to manage your lives. She can't be expected to do this. So even then, it took someone else to sort of advocate for me. And that says a lot about us.
Yeah, that people wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
It took somebody else. That's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's obviously fantastic that you've had somebody who's been able to do that, because, it is very hard to do it for yourself when you're ill. But it comes back to this, like, believing your patient and the sort of invisible illness side of it as well. If you've got a broken leg, or you were talking about your chronic back pain, that's something that's a bit easier for someone to see and to look at and to acknowledge. And it's much harder for them to say, oh, well, it doesn't exist, because it's physically there in front of you. I think a lot of what people have struggled with long COVID is that The biomarkers aren't necessarily there. You can't do a test for it. It's not visible in the same way. So it's much easier for people to sort of brush it under the carpet and say, oh, they're just being difficult. And again, it's not everybody that's doing that, but it's a lot.
It's not everybody, but a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people, a lot of doctors are doing that. A lot of family members are doing that. Friends are doing that. I mean, it's happened to everyone I know who has had long COVID has been questioned like that. Oh, but are you sure? Maybe you should see this doctor, this doctor. Oh, maybe you've got anxiety. Maybe you've got depression. All of those things have happened. And this very interesting thing about biomarkers again reminds me of this incident that when I went to my surgeon in March with my latest MRI scans, I went walking and he saw my scans and he looked at me and said, "How are you walking? Your scans are terrible." And again, having that scan made it easier for him to sympathize with me. Yeah, you must be in a lot of pain. But when I went for just a consultation without my scans, he wasn't really that sympathetic because I looked okay. I'm somebody who's used to operating in pain. No one can really tell. But you have long COVID where you don't even have those scans or those biomarkers or those tests available except for maybe one or two countries in the world. So maybe think about, oh my God, so many people are just suffering and there's nobody really curious enough to pay attention to what's happening. There is no curiosity, and that's sad.
It is, yeah. It is very sad. You mentioned, things like anxiety and depression, and and I think they're very common with long COVID, but they're not the cause. They're as a result of it. It's like
Yeah.
I'm anxious about everything. Yeah, that's because I'm ill.
Yeah, and also because your heart rate is crazy, and there's POTS or there's dysautonomia or there are all of these other symptoms which mimic anxiety. For example, a lot of people having night sweats. Even younger kids, how do you explain night sweats in, say, a 12-year-old boy? You can say that maybe a woman who's in her 30s or 40s, you can pass her off as, oh, you're just perimenopausal or you're menopausal. But what do you say about children who've got long COVID who have night sweats? I mean, well, what's going on there? So a lot of these symptoms or of the illness do mimic anxiety, and it's really crazy because I have questioned myself so much. I was like, oh my God, my heart is just all the time, it's just hammering in my chest. If your heart rate is a 150 lying down, of course it's going to be hammering. What do you expect? But it's so hard. Yeah, I remember going to the gynecologist because I was struggling so much. My cycle had gone haywire and night sweats and so much cramping and very weird, strange kind of symptoms that I was not able to explain to anybody. So I went to her and she took just 5 minutes to, just ask me questions. And there was no curiosity about what else could be happening. And I'm telling her, I have long COVID, and there is a lot of research to say that I was trying to speak up for myself, but there was no listening about it. It was, oh no, you just have anxiety. I'm giving you some drugs, and I'm giving you some plant progesterone, and you should be okay. And like, there we go again. And I just walked out because it was no use really.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating. Again, you see a lot of people talking about it on support groups and things, how you've got this appointment and you've been looking forward to it for ages because you've probably been on a waiting list for some time, and and you've done your preparation because you've got all your research and you've got your lists of symptoms and your questions that you want to ask because you know that if you don't write them down you're going to forget. So you've put in all of this preparation, and then you've gone to the appointment, which is a whole load of energy and stress, so that will have added loads on, and then you show up to your appointment to this person that you think, oh my goodness, they're going to make things better, and then they dismiss you. And yeah, it must be a horrible, horrible thing for that to happen.
It is. I remember freezing. I remember not being able to say anything. I was just so badly triggered because every time you've not been believed, be it by doctors or other time, it just comes up so strongly for you. As it is, like you said, it's a frightening experience to be in a clinic because you're masked up and you're not touching anything and you're sitting like this, so scared, and you're hearing for people who are coughing or sneezing. At least that's what was happening to me. I was just so scared because those are the places where infections like rampant. And you're so terrified that I'm coming here. What if I go back and I have an infection? All of that's happening. And you're having to watch everything. And then you go in and you just, dismissed, you're invisible. I mean, at least for me, I am from a very privileged section of society in India, what you call the upper middle class here, fairly wealthy. We've got doctors in the family. So it's a whole lot easier for me. I can do things on the side that other people can't. But it made me think about, oh my God, how many people must be going through this and they have no access to anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you obviously have been on a very up and down experience over the last, 2.5 years, as I think a lot of people have. Um, did you find things that sort of helped you?
I think the first things that helped was the basic medication to take care of the POTS and the dysautonomia because that was really severe for me. And when that was taken care of, I could actually pay attention to other things. And it took about a month for the medication to be, fine tuned and, for me to understand this is how much and how many times a day and all of that. Other than all of the other supplements and supplements for the gut, especially, that have really helped over, it took about 3 months for all of the supplements, the prebiotics, the probiotics, and the nitrokinase, and all of those things to really kick in. And I started feeling better about in September. Now, I think for me, when I know that my symptoms are getting severe, three or four things really help immediately. One is just cutting down all sound and light and stimulation. So I'll just withdraw to I call it my bat cave now. So I have things in place. Everybody in the family knows that, okay, no, she's good. She doesn't want to be disturbed. I'll, text everyone, don't text me, don't call me. And I just withdraw in that sense. So that withdrawing really helps to cut down stimulation. I call it being triggered. I don't have another word for it. Every time you're triggered, the emotional side of you also get triggered because you're afraid again for so many reasons. How long is the crash going to be? How am I going to, recover? And you have your appointments lined up, you have your work lined up, everything's just up for a toss. So I think just withdrawing for me first thing and then focusing on how am I feeling inside. So if I have to have a good cry, I do that. It makes me feel lighter. I'm able to think straight then. If I need to do my breath work, I do that. Breath work has really, really helped me. It has helped me regulate stuff. I feel a lot calmer throughout the day now. And ice packs are my life savior. Ice packs on my neck, and especially when I'm burning up. So one of my symptoms is I burn up. Yeah, I just go all red and I start heating up really badly. I will not be able to think straight because it's so uncomfortable. So ice packs really help. So I think these things, yeah, and I just get very mindful of how much energy am I going to spend the next 2 or 3 days. And other than these immediate things, the one thing that has really helped is pacing, pacing myself really well. So I have my week planned in advance. So on Saturday, I'll sit and think about my week and all my clients because I do want to keep working, although my work has come down to one session every other day. And I used to be doing 4 or 5 every day, but my work is very intense. So I also don't want to feel overwhelmed. So I do one a day. So I'll be sitting down on my calendar, planning really well. Okay, do you want to have a telephone call in the morning with somebody? Or do you want to have like a friend over in the evening? So it'll have to be spaced out. And because of my book, there's a lot of promotional work, which again involves me speaking a lot, which is very exhausting for me. So I'll just, if there's something intense going on, then there can't be anything the next day. And every time I've messed that up, like on good days, like the first week after my period is really great. Just something hormonally happens where I feel better. And I tend to overdo them. So I've done it twice and I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to do it this time. So to be really careful. So I think pacing is one thing that has really helped, that you have one activity, after that you rest. And whatever, is a good week, depending on that, I think. So that has really helped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard, isn't it?
It
To
is.
make yourself do the resting, or build in the time for extra breath work, or lying down time, or whatever it is that you need to do. It's so hard. I mean, I do it. I'll be sitting here editing a podcast or something, and I'll think, right, well, I've done an hour, so I should go and have a break, but there's only like 20 minutes left, so I'll just keep going. Or and then you've got to be so strict with yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, you have to really be strict with yourself. And but luckily for me, I think because of, I think, when I look back, I feel like I had a lot of depression as a child and as a teenager. So I used to be in my cave a lot, just reading and curled up and reading. So I think it's my default to actually be able to rest without feeling guilty. But the last 3 years I spent trying to not do that. So now it's come back to a thing where I have to learn to relearn to rest again, be quiet again, and not feel guilty about it, because that's really hard. Because my mind keeps telling me you're becoming that again. What I was while I was growing up. You're becoming that again, or you're becoming lazy, and you've got so much opportunity, and all of that. That self-talk is something that really bothers me. So I have to really calm that down and look at, no, you've got a diagnosis and doctors have told you this, you're not imagining this, you are really sick, and you have to sort of then regulate. Yeah, it is difficult. It's not easy because it kills spontaneity. And I used to be very spontaneous. And, let's go take a walk. Oh, it's a full moon night. I'm going to go see the Taj Mahal in the full moon. I used to do these crazy things all the time. And my dad would make fun of me for that a lot. And now I just can't, I can't do it. Even when I plan well, there are days when I can't because something else has happened. And now you have to go rest.
Yeah, it really does. And like you sound a little bit like me in that, spontaneity is quite a big part of you.
Yeah.
It certainly feels like that to me, this ability to just look out the window and be like, right, I'm going to go and do this or that, or I'm going to go off on a 4-day hike because, the weather's looking good. And it's these things that you can't do them because you're unwell. So it almost feels like it erodes who you are.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole lot of other stuff tied up in that, isn't it? When you start to lose your identity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So many relationships tied up in that. Your friendships, especially in the city, how people know you. They just don't know you anymore. And they'll call you and they'll say, oh, you know what, this is happening. Do you want to go? And for you to spell it out to them, oh, no, I can't go. What's happened? Do you have a cold? And then to explain, no, I have long COVID. And like, for example, I had my first book event on Friday last week. So I was so careful. I did 2 whole days of complete resting, not doing anything at all to be prepared for the event. And it was a small gathering. I made sure it was small. But when I got there, 5 minutes in being there, and I start to heat up and my heart rate's going crazy, but I have to stay there because it's my book event. And I don't know how I pulled through that. I just kept breathing in and out. But from the outside, I look fine. The pictures have come out lovely. So how do you explain to people that the mic's too loud for me? I can't. So I have photos of me sitting like that, my ears clamped. I couldn't take the noise, and I had to cut it down so I could speak. So there are all of these other attachments to it. How the world knows you. The world knows you as somebody, but you're not that anymore. But I think I've also been consistently trying to revise that by talking to people who are close to me, by putting out Facebook posts, or by doing videos with my brother, and just trying to normalize this for those around us so that it's okay for others too, who these people know. And I've also let go of a lot of friendships where people didn't understand or didn't want to understand for whatever. I mean, they have their reasons, but it was hard for them to understand or to accommodate to this new me. So I just learned to let go of them. So that part of it has also been strange.
We'll be right back. Hey there, I'm just jumping in for a second to see if you're enjoying this episode. If you're finding it useful, maybe you would consider sharing it somewhere, a friend, a group, or even on your Twitter feed. If everyone was able to share just once, we'd be able to get this information out to even more people who really, really need it. So please consider sharing somewhere if you possibly can. I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that I think everybody will have noticed it to some extent, where friends and family or people close to you in whatever way, they don't understand it and we'll try to explain it to them. But, that's quite a lot of energy, for me to sit down and explain to my friend or my family or whoever, that this is the thing, this is what's happening, this is what I struggle with, this is what I might need your help with.
Yeah.
If I agree to meet up with you, then there's a good chance that I might have to cancel and you are going to have to be okay with that because that is just what it's like now. And you can go through this whole thing, but that's quite tiring. And I find certainly that saying it once often isn't enough. Sometimes you then have to go back and explain it again because they don't really
Oh,
understand.
yeah,
And
again.
and that is really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard, but I think it also sort of trains you or puts you through a process where you let go of a lot of people. And it's hard always to let go of people. But at least for me, I let go of people who would not willingly invest some sort of curiosity into maybe reading up material that I've shared with them. It's hard for me to say this over and over again. Would you mind reading this up? Can you read this? Or can you whatever, just try and find out on your own without me having to say it over and over again. So anybody who's been like that, like not really curious or not asking me what's happening, I've just like let go of them and stuck close to like 4 or 5 friends who make the effort to understand and adapt around me. And that is enough, I think. You don't even have that energy anymore to have too many friends or to do too many things. But I'm very grateful that I have a few friends who are very sensitive to my needs and who ask questions. Is this okay? Is that okay? And most importantly, they don't take offense when I say things like, please don't sing that loud. Or, just shh. And they're okay with that because they get that it physically sort of hurts me. So yeah, it's got both its upsides and downsides, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's great that you've got some people because, I've certainly noticed that this whole thing, it's very isolating
Yeah,
in so many ways. I mean, partly through lockdowns is obviously isolating for everybody, but when you're ill for such a long time, it's a lot more on top of everything else. And I think having that support and having some sort of social interaction, whether it's online or in person, it's so important, isn't it, to have
yeah, it
some.
is.
It obviously has to be on your terms. That's the difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think, for example, one of my closest friends also has long COVID and hers is like really, really, really bad. But it's just so much easier to talk to her because we understand exactly what we're saying. And she'd be like, I can't type too long, so I'm going to send a voice message. I'm like, yeah, okay, I know exactly why this is happening. Or sometimes she'll just send me like hints and I'll understand the whole thing. And so it's also sort of led to these kind of very deep intimacies with people where they're also struggling in their own way and you sort of understand each other so well. Like when she's really sick, she doesn't have to explain to me why she's not answering the phone or why her texts are like so irregular. I just know what's happening. And the same for my brother. I've got 2 other friends who have long COVID. My dad's got long COVID. Yeah, there's a lot of long COVID in my family. My mother's gone nuts, seriously trying to understand what's happening, and it's very hard for her to modulate her voice, and it's been a challenge for us to explain it without getting triggered, and there's been fights and arguments. But now we're sort of arriving at a place where it's sort of easy. At least my dad and I get each other very well, and we'll just, we'll WhatsApp each other if we can't go see each other, or we're on different floors. So it's funny as well. You're like WhatsApping each other in the same house. I WhatsApp my son from my room. So yes, it's difficult, but it also gives rise to these other different opportunities of relating, which can be meaningful as well.
Yeah, and I think, you've just put your finger on it. Having people who understand, other people with long COVID or with some other chronic illness, they
Yeah,
understand in a way that a healthy person can be very supportive and they can be amazing,
yeah.
but they don't get it in quite the same way because they haven't physically experienced it. And I've certainly found that really useful to have those people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. One thing that just came up for me is that kind of comparison guilt that happens to me a lot because I know very closely a lot of people who have LC and they all have varying degrees of it. So 2, 3 people have it really bad where they're, even getting out of the bed is a challenge, where their walking time is some 3 minutes to 5 minutes per day, and even that has a huge cost. So when I think of myself, it's sometimes hard for me to even say to myself that I have LC because I'm not as bad as they are. But I have to then come back to myself and say, but this is your experience and you cannot compare yourself to others. And yes, they do have it really bad, but maybe you have it bad in other ways. and it's okay. So there's that kind of guilt that I get caught up in really quickly. I don't know if it happens to other people, but it happens to me a lot. Like I'll deliberately tone down my happiness, or I will not share stuff that I've done with those friends because I don't want them to feel like they're missing out, or
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think something that someone said to me was really helpful. It was, just because someone else has it worse doesn't mean that it's not awful for you. And actually, making that comparison and saying, oh, well, that person's more ill, therefore my illness is not valid, is actually, you're gaslighting yourself when you do that, aren't you? And actually, that's not helpful. Your experience is your experience, and we're all living our own personal hell, aren't we, with this? So
yeah, different combinations of it.
exactly, so if you're having an awful experience, then I guess, yeah, that is valid and important, I think. Yeah.
But there's this interesting thing that's coming up for me, and I think I should say that I've also become sort of wary of being around very healthy people. It makes me feel like I'm dragging them down. I don't know how to explain it. But I recently met someone really nice who I've known for like a good 3, 4 years, and something's developing romantically. I'm very happy. It's also one of those things that has helped me in this very difficult year. It has helped cheer me up a little bit. It has helped, if he's been encouraging me and been there for me, and he's not judging me when I'm crying or have a meltdown and things like that. But it also makes me very afraid because I don't know how I'm going to be like when. So things which are so regular for couples to do, like meet up or have fun or go for a walk, I can't do any of that. And it upsets me to think about what is he going to have to put up with. And we have these conversations every other day because I have mini crashes every other day. So I'll be glum and be like, I don't know, what have you got yourself into, and things like that. But it's encouraging to hear the other person's response when he says things like, but you've been getting better. And it's okay for you to have like low days. It's all right. It's, your personality I'm after really. So I'm like, okay. But it does make you think about many things. It makes dreaming very hard.
Yeah, and hoping for the future and all of those things. It's very hard to know what your future is going to be, but we have to keep that hope. We have to,
Yeah.
but it can be really difficult.
Yeah, because on some days when people say things like, oh, but you'll get better, you just don't know if you will. And you just want to snap, but how do you know? Because you see so many people who've been getting worse. So it's just so hard to plan anything, to plan trips, or you're traveling together, or even simple things like there were so many things I used to enjoy doing with my son. He's 15, very active, goes to the gym and exercises, and I can't keep up with him. It's hard.
That must be really difficult. And I think we do this thing. I do it as well. I'm constantly expecting my partner to just walk out the door and not come back because, why would he want to stay with me?
Yeah.
And we do this thing, don't we, where we just don't see our own worth
Yeah.
because, it's like we were saying earlier about when you start to lose your identity a bit because all you are is someone who's ill.
Yeah.
But that's not all that you are. It's just kind of what it feels like. And somebody else is able to see that, like my partner can see much better when I'm doing better and when I'm doing worse, but I can't because I'm sort of just so in it.
Yeah. So in it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's really difficult.
It is difficult.
Yeah, I think we need to remember to see our own worth better.
I think we do. We need to remember also, remember our life outside of this in terms of the work that we've done or the possibility, or, there's something a friend of mine says to me often, and I just thank her so much for it when she says that who you are is also what's in your mind, and there is no limit to that. Who says physical activity is the only way of measuring worth or activity? You look at your mind, you continue to write and do so much different kinds of work. I mean, there have been days when my clients have needed me and I've not been able to get up, so I've been on call with them with on headphones and lying down and just talking to them, and that's worth something.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look back over and think, well, I am better than I was, even though I'm not as better as I want to be. That's terrible English, isn't it? But you're able to kind of see the improvement over the longer term, rather than when you look back 2 weeks. It's difficult to see usually, but also over kind of what you've managed to do. you're managing to keep working. That's amazing. People who have done all this advocacy work, people who have been working with governments, people, who've been doing all of these things despite being sick.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And you've written a book as well. We forget all the things that we have managed to do, I think.
Yeah, we have managed to do despite everything, and maybe because of everything. I don't know. This experience also makes you expand in very different, interesting ways. It adds, at least for me, my book, the quality of my book changed after I fell sick. So the first half is very different, and the second half is very different. It goes in way deep into things. Or even when I talk about things now, I'm just so much more aware of how different people experience the world very, very differently. Or there is this, at least for me, since I've fallen sick, the capacity to forgive has increased really because a long-term friend of mine, we stopped talking when she got long COVID last year. She got COVID and she's still not recovered. And she was so sick, and there was no way for me to be able to understand what she's feeling. Of course, I had my brother, and I would understand and not call her, not text her, but it was still hard because I felt rejected. That she's not reaching out, she doesn't reply, she leaves your messages unseen, and all of those things. But when I experienced severity of symptoms myself, I began to understand better, and there was that forgiveness and that willingness to just wait that has emerged over time. That maybe she will if she feels like it. Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that this is going to raise a lot of awareness of illness in general, I think maybe, or long-term illness in general. I mean, I've certainly realized myself over the last couple of years that although I thought I understood, I had a few friends who had ME before COVID, and I sort of thought I understood it. And I now realize that I didn't at all. So I kind of hope that it will have raised a bit more
Yeah.
awareness about just dealing with these sort of conditions and what people are going through, and also what should be done to make life easier for them,
Yeah.
in terms of, I don't know, disability provisions or, whatever it is. Yeah, you have to hope that something.
Yeah. 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 Even simpler things like how we talk to each other. I remember when I first felt sick, it's a simple statement like "get well soon" would make me hopping mad. What soon? There is no soon in my life anymore. What soon are you talking about? I don't know if there ever will be a fully recovered me, or. So I've begun to pay attention to how these very sort of insidious ways in which we say things without really understanding how they may hit the other person. So, and what is it that they need more than what is socially appropriate for us to say when someone's sick, or, for example, when someone's lost somebody? It's made me think about these things also. What do you say to someone who's lost a loved one? Oh, I'm so sorry. It doesn't mean anything. So, this sort of illness is also, at least for me, made me able to sit with discomfort and other people's rage or anger or grief in a way that I was just not able to do before. So that kind of expansiveness has happened, and I feel like maybe if people start paying attention to things like this, things could be easier for so many others. I've written about it so much on my Facebook. I keep writing about these things that I experience because that's one place I draw a lot of strength from. A lot of my communities are on Facebook, and I don't feel alone so much. So I do see that kind of engagement slowly in pockets, starting to happen. How can we be more mindful in physical and non-physical ways around people who are sick?
Yeah, definitely. I really, really hope so. That's one of the things that I really hope will come out of this.
Yeah.
It's more sort of understanding, more compassion, more interest in how other people are feeling. Or, well, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
It has. Thank you so much to all of my guests and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch